What's happening, troops? Episode 6 of the YN podcast. This one's with Declan Harrigan, someone that not a lot of you guys will know because he's not very prominent on social media, doesn't post a lot. He's quite big on LinkedIn, to be fair, so if you're on LinkedIn, I'm sure you probably would have seen Declan on there, but he's someone that is full of character, full of wisdom. He's got so much to give, it's beyond belief. And one of the main reasons I wanted to get him on this podcast is his extreme exposure to vulnerability, the willingness to go into his past and really pick apart the areas that changed him into the person that he is today. I promise you this episode is something that you will not want to miss. And I'm telling you just now, guys, when it comes to Declan, whether you know him or not, this is something that is going to deliver an immense amount of value. His book is also going to pop up on screen. I was lucky enough to get one signed and given to me after the podcast, which is a massive thank you to Declan. I cannot wait to read it. It's going to be truly incredible. So yeah, have an incredible day, guys. If you're on YouTube, make sure you leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you're on Spotify, ring that wee bell and make sure you tag us on Instagram and drop us a wee DM with your favourite part, just so we know the areas that we should best be focusing on that is going to best develop your mindset. So Declan, there's multiple reasons to why I wanted you on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we spoke about that previously, of why I actually wanted to get this sorted in the first place.
Yeah.
Number one, when we first spoke, we got into a deep level of vulnerability and discussion that I believe, just through that one conversation, that there would be a reason for you to be in this podcast, because I speak about it so often. Vulnerability is where I believe the magic happens. Two, the business that you run is incredibly interesting for a start, but the reasons why you actually started running the business that you are in at the moment is something that I find a lot of people find incredibly captivating.
Yeah.
And three, I don't know if it's a generational thing as such, but I feel like a lot of people have either struggled from the mental health aspect as of recent, or they know someone that does and they don't know what to do, how to help them. And I think that we can get a real insight into that. And then also you've got a paradox with your business, which is so interesting, which I don't think anyone is experiencing, at least. But a bit about yourself, because I know, like, publicly we've not done anything together, so nobody even know that we're associated in any way, shape or form. So for anyone that doesn't know who you are, a bit about you and what you're doing at the moment, mate.
So I'm Declan Harrigan. I'm the founder and CEO of S.M.I.L.E Counselling. So I set S.M.I.L.E Counselling up 7 years ago, 2015. It's born out of frustration, to be quite honest. I didn't want to set it up. It was something that it was a result of a lot of work I was doing in other jobs. Whenever I moved to Scotland, I was working for one of the big charities, and then I worked for the local authority. A lot of working with young people. I hate this term, but the hardest to reach. I disagree with that term, but everybody's reachable. It's just about how you do it. So but what my experience was that a lot of the young people I was working with were 16 plus, and every single one of them were looking for mental health services or on waiting lists, and they were just waiting too long. So it became a kind of bed of frustration for me.
Yeah.
So I decided, first I spoke to some people that I thought might be able to make a shift in that without me having to create a whole new organisation. But I think a lot of organisations at the time, especially statutory bodies, were trying to save a lot of money. And the answers I was getting was, no, we can't, or no, it's going to be too long, or we're saving budgets and all this kind of stuff. So it was just, right, well, I'm a qualified therapist. I'll volunteer sometime, evenings and weekends. If I can see a few young people, offer them some time and help them. And it just grew from there. So I ended up kind of just putting a board of trustees together and creating a SCIO, so a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation. So a social enterprise model, but very much run like a business. And 7 years on, and we've got 20 plus staff, 10 of a board, going really strong. So that was the kind of birth of it. It was that anger, frustration, probably. And I think for me, coming from where I came from in a working class area in Derry in Ireland, there was no services for young people. When I was younger, there was no services like this really at all. Like you say, generational stuff, as time has gone on, young people are more accepted and acceptable of mental health concerns and issues, but then they're reaching out and they can't get anywhere. So it's like, do you know, like these people are actually asking now. You know, we've worked so hard for them to speak up, have a voice. Now that they're giving their voice, we're saying no, we can't help you. So what? It was really just kind of it was a bit of a risk, to be honest with you. I left a permanent job in the council, so it was like, you know, do I leave a permanent job with good pension, good structure? But I think for me, the social aim and who I am overrode that. And luckily, I have a really supportive wife who kind of says, look, you know, I know you need to do this. So, and we were expecting it at the time. So it was like, I think she was glad to get me out from under her feet too at the same time. She's like, I go evenings and weekends, great, happy days. And then after a year, I think I went part-time, got some funding. I remember the first part of funding I got, it was £1,770 to the penny from Unlimited. And that allowed me to get like 6 months rent for like a wee pokey office and a what you probably would have got nosebleeds in it. It was that high in a building. And two basic chairs and a recycled laptop for 80 quid.
Yeah.
But it served its purpose. And now we're coming up to supporting our 1,000th young person in therapy.
That's incredible. So there's a couple of things from what you were saying there. One, the fact that you obviously volunteered your time when you were while you're working for the council, which a lot of people speak about, like their why and how important that actually is. But the fact that you were, you know, put that above your own, I wouldn't say like pleasure as such, but like you're willing to do it in your spare time where others wouldn't in it. So why? Is probably the easiest way to phrase it. Like, why were you willing to?
I think the question I would say back is why not? You know, too many people are asking the question why, and there is the reason. You know, why do you do that? I think it's who I am. I think it's partly how I've been brought up. You know, if you can help, you help, and I wouldn't say I'm like, you know, I'm not the Dalai Lama. You know, I have. I have my vices, but I think there's a point where you just kind of say, right, well, do you know what? If I have the opportunity and the space to be able to help one person, right, that's all. That's what it's all about. You know, if I can give something that I have that is going to help somebody else, then that's what I'm going to do. Like I say, like when I was younger, there was none of that kind of stuff. Mental health wasn't really a thing. You know, back 29 years ago, scarily, you know, it was just like, it was all derogatory. You know, mental was used as a kind of a slang term, and you're mental, which it still is. But there's more young people now acceptable of, you know, well, I do need support, and their peers accept that as well. You know,
and there's another thing you said as well along the lines of somewhat everyone is reachable. What is what is the experiences that you've had that has made you believe that everyone is reachable, or is it an element of hope?
But of both, John, probably. I think it began with hope. I think if you don't have any hope, then it's you know, there's no point in me being in this job that if I don't hope that there's everybody that I work with or anybody I support can come through the challenges that they're facing. But through experience as well, you know, you often get clients coming in who sometimes are at their lowest ebb and in their darkest hour. And if they're brave enough to walk over that door and ask for support and ask for help, then there's hope. Right. It's whenever they can't make it over the door. So then that's the part where how do we reach you? How do we reach the people who feel like they don't have any hope or you know, they're at the end? And that's the part where we kind of say, right, well, there is always, until the very last minute, there's always hope.
And how many times have you had someone essentially come in and walk through that door and then walk straight back out ever?
Aye, absolutely. Sometimes people aren't ready for because it's too real. You know, there's times whenever you'll get clients who will come in and you'll kind of know, because there's always a hesitation even kind of in the planning. Do you know, can you make it for this time? I'm not sure if I can make it for that time. Can I change? Do you know what? Can I change the day? Can I put it back a week? And then you kind of you're led into that kind of, right, I don't think this person's ready. You know, and over time, you know, I've been doing this for 14 years as a therapist, and you begin to realise patterns of, right, well, I'm not sure if this person's going to be coming. And more often than not now, I'm generally right that no, this wasn't the right time for them, and that's okay. Do you know, it's one of those things that being able to come in and talk about your darkest, most secrets, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Do you know? And I think for me, when I first went to therapy, I was like, I'm not telling this stranger anything. Who are they? Do you know, who do they think they are that they can sit and listen to all this stuff and be okay? So it is about building trust. It's like any relationship, John, right? It's like a relationship with your partner, with your parent, with your best friend. Everything's built on trust, you know, and until you have that trust, that person isn't going to tell you the things that they really need to tell you, because what you'll find is they'll come with a presenting issue, which is very rarely the reason they're there. You know, you'll come on with a socially acceptable reason of why you, well, I've got depression or I've got anxiety, right? That's two of the most prime examples, because it's two of the most socially acceptable. Very few will come in and say, look, I'm suicidal, I'm going to take my life. You know, I need help. Because there's a stigma attached to that. Even today, you know, that even we're working so hard on raising awareness and it being okay not to be okay, and these things are amazing that we're trying to do that. But when you're at that part, you know, it's a brave thing to come in and say that. So usually you don't get that from clients until they have your trust.
I think you kind of touched on some of the areas as well of why people specifically wouldn't open up. When I think about some of the reasons that maybe sprung in my mind that I'd heard before, is maybe people believing that their perception of who they are is then somewhat skewed, for example, by conveying how they feel or whatever it is that they've got going on. Or I even listened to this amazing podcast with Tim Grover, who wrote Relentless. He was on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, and he speaks about how his darkest times are the areas that have enhanced his life the most. And for a lot of like what he was speaking about, like, I don't know if you like listened to it. I think he got to a stage where obviously started writing his books and stuff like that, but I don't think he really knew how to convey, not necessarily him himself, but when I think about like Tiger Woods, for example, when everything came out about like the affair he was having and all, and he was meant to have this mad like kind of family image, like that was an element of what Tim Grover would refer to as his dark side. He wanted everything. He wanted to win everything and have whatever else they wanted. And I think that when people start to believe that they either need help in a certain area or whatever it may be, they can sometimes be put off by the perception of what the other individual will see, especially if it's a man, for example. A man will want to be, you know, somewhat masculine, but they'll feel that maybe their problems aren't, or maybe their problems, even the word problems around it, but like even what they believe their problems are something that is, maybe they are masculine, but even too masculine, or they just don't want to talk about it, man, because they don't want to be viewed in a different way. Which I think an element of that program will come from obviously school and stuff like that anyways. But anyone that is maybe struggling to get over the perception aspect, what would be like a piece of advice that you would give them of like how they're viewing themselves for actually conveying how they feel or whatever it is that they're going through?
I think a lot of the time it comes down to maybe the client doesn't really look at what their core belief is about themselves. So you'll often work with clients and think about, well, where is this coming from? You know, that an example might be like you get a phone call from your mum, right? And you say, oh, geez, I missed that call. I feel really bad. Why do you feel bad? Do you know, why is it you feel bad? Oh, I feel bad because, you know, she might have needed something and you know, now I've let her down. She maybe needed me to go and do something. Well, why does that matter? Why? And then you get down to the point of somebody saying, well, do you know, I feel bad. Like I feel like I'm a bad person. You know, and how often do you feel like that? Well, I feel like that quite often actually, because I feel like I don't do that. And if I don't pick up the phone immediately, if I don't respond to a text immediately, people will think badly of me, you know, because we live in that world of instant gratification. So it's what we expect from others as well. So what you expect from others is what you assume others expect from you. And it's not necessarily true. Somebody might be just ringing to see what the crack is. and that's it, flat.
Yeah.
It's not, doesn't specifically have to be, but you will find people will go to the most extreme, right? Well, oh my God, I need to ring them back. I need to ring them back. Well, why do you need to ring them back? Can you not have 10 minutes for yourself?
Yeah.
Is it necessary? Or if they really needed you, they would have rang you back again, right? So maybe they'll chat to you later.
Yeah.
So I think, and you touched on something there, talking about men coming in for support and stuff. I mean, we've still very few male therapists in this industry. The last number I seen was 16%. So, and I see more of that growing, and more men are becoming encouraged to come into the helping profession, if you like, and the listening profession. But it's still way off mark, and we need to encourage more men to come forward. And again, it's getting better, but it's getting better with a younger age range. Younger males who are more accepting of, well, I'm happy to ask for help. Because it's encouraged and it's instilled that in education and early years sometimes as well. But it wasn't when I was at school. Do you know what I mean? It was like you would have been called some really bad names, and it was like you're this and that, and you go, well, I'm weak. Why do I need to go for help? I'll just get on it, man up. Just suck it up and all whatever the words was, right? When really it's a point where we need to be encouraging more men to come through the door. And locally we're starting to see more at S.M.I.L E, especially the younger age. But again, I changed our age range from the beginning, because when I said S.M.I.L Up, it was 16 to 24. And I was doing some workshops in schools with S3s, and they were saying, oh, S.M.I.L's great, love the idea, all this stuff, but what about us? And I says, right, fair point. But my assumption, naively, was that, statutory services will help you, you're under 16, school focus, social work, through care, all that kind of stuff. Wasn't happening. Because what was happening was the bad kids, and I use that term very loosely, what kids would perceive bad kids, so disruptive and having to go to the hubs and all this, they were getting rewarded, right? So they were going, well, just take them to football, just take them out for the day, take them biking, take them anywhere, just get them out of the school. Totally the wrong way to deal with it, because what was happening was, I'm not saying it wasn't helpful, but they weren't focusing on the real issue. They were just masking it and saying, right, get them out. They're not going to they're not going to get us passes. So let's just try and not saying all schools do that, but you see it quite often. Whereas it was the kids who I identified was, what about the kids who do all right in school? They do okay, they coast, they don't have a key worker, they don't have a social worker, they don't have, they're the ones who need the support from us, because they don't have somebody going, I'm going to get you a referral, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They're the ones going, I need help and I don't know where to go. And then you're kind of struggling for them to find a safe place to find. So we ended up lowering the age range to 11 in our constitution, because we seen that transition age was more important to see your kind of primary 7s and S1s. And as soon as we lowered the age range, it just went poof.
No, it makes complete sense. There's a couple of things that you touched on there which are incredibly important when you're referring to the masculine aspect of men and the kind of generational gap. I think a memory that popped into my head was when I was really young. I'd never seen my dad upset ever. I'd never seen him cry ever. And we were at the hospital one of the days, and he had a cast on his leg. And got in the car. Mum was like, "How you doing? How you doing? Everything all right?" How'd the scan go? Nothing. No noise. No response. And then he just started crying, man. And after crying, he got kind of like, because I was in the car, he was kind of like, "Oh, the fucking don't want to see me," and like it. And because I think because of the relationship I had with my mum, I understood that, getting upset and it was all part of life, man. It had to come through. Whereas, say I really looked up to my dad, for example, I would have then been programmed somewhat to believe that was how men had to be. Whereas I never ever believed that, but that is always the memory that comes to my mind, because I think about people that could be listening that have been brought up with that same level of programming. People speak about their dads all the time, where they're just no emotion, hard nuts to crack.
Aye.
But then they're annoyed all the time. They've got a short fuse.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of other shit going on. That was one of the things that popped up for me when you were speaking there, because it was, yeah, very real for sure, man. I think if my programming wasn't skewed for me being like having such a close relationship with my mum, I could have very easily developed a mindset towards mental health that was negative, man.
Aye.
Which I imagine probably a lot of people experience that you speak to there.
Aye, and you know that typical scenario, you know, it's across the board. You know, I think probably in most cultures, certainly generationally, like, you know, your dad, my dad, probably me, I probably would have went down that route even if I didn't go into the training that I went into. It would have been very much, just lock it down,
Yeah.
you know, swallow it, don't talk about it. You know, and interestingly, we talk about how the older generation just close it down. But what we forget is, and especially if you think about Scotland specifically, areas where, you know, they were down the pits, and, you know, there were areas that they were doing that kind of working class, you know, hard labour, right? You know, whether they were doing, it was all hand graft. Where was the one place they probably went after work?
The pub.
The pub, right? Socially acceptable at that point. They go straight from work to the pub, don't pass go, don't collect your 200 quid. I hear stories about, you know, boys getting their dinner delivered to the pub.
Yeah.
Probably at a 50 mile an hour speed limit, you know, getting chucked across the bar.
Yeah.
But what we know historically is that was a place that men released, right, and talked about stuff. It was the only places that they would have went that they would have spoke about stuff with other males. So that actually, I'm going to say this tentatively, right? It was almost a therapeutic output, right? Because it was a safe place for them that they went to. It was somewhere that they went. They knew they could be surrounded by peers that would understand what they were going through. Yep. So if they were doing work and some of their mates were just unfinished the shift as well, they go, it's a hard graft, and you know, I'm under pressure with money for the rent still, and I mean they're buying booze, but you know, but that ironically was one of the places that was a safe place, which transpired where there was a reduced suicide rate in that time, because there was a release for males, albeit into another negative kind of format, but it was a release, and then it became more and more less socially acceptable, and you know, the expectation of what a new family dynamic would look like. Quite rightly, you know, come home from work but then it changed, because they would come on, they wouldn't talk. Just what you're describing. I'll come on. How was your day? Fine. Yeah. You know, it was all right. You know, really, they'd probably going, what a day I've had. But just don't talk about it, because why would I burden my family? You hear that word quite often. Yeah. Don't want to be a burden.
First thought that came in my head was offloading. You feel like you're offloading in a way that's a lot of people haven't got time for it. You know, a lot of people haven't got time for it, is the thought that comes into a lot of anyone's head whenever they think about telling people the problems that they are going through. They always think about, they'll have their own problems to deal with, man. They don't need mine as well.
Or people are worse off than me. Yeah. There's people worse off than me. Why should I share my problems? Yeah. You know?
Nah, I completely understand. And there was one other thing, obviously we got on the topic of school. So when we first spoke, or the second time that we spoke, went into quite a bit of detail about essentially why you actually started doing what you were doing in the first place, what your actual upbringing looked like. And also we kind of touched on your experience within school as well, where people were coming to you for advice and felt like they had that kind of safe space. And for me, that was almost like you were just meant to be doing this shit, man. Like, that was what I took away from it. Because it's very much something that, like, you didn't necessarily have any training or anything like that at that time. Do you know what I mean?
14, 15.
In school, and people would come to you with their problems, man. So do you want to talk about that and how it looked?
Aye. So I grew up, don't know if you've ever seen the programme Dairy Gears.
I've not.
No? Oh my God. What a travesty. Get on it. That's your homework.
I'll got it.
So I grew up in Derry, and born in the early 80s. So growing up there, I was still growing up through the Troubles. So I was coming up through the tail end, kind of middle of the Troubles. And And it wasn't until I moved to Scotland that I realised that was absolutely not a normal childhood whatsoever. So you're growing up, and at the time, everybody was poor, right? Nobody had a lot of income in Derry unless there was very few. Like, for example, if I was at school, everybody got free school dinners, right? The few that didn't, you were like, snobs, that kind of way. You're like, who do they think they are? But really, it was like, well, we're all on the one bar here. We all from low income families, and it wasn't obvious because everybody was the same. So it was like, well, we're all from that kind of background. So and everybody was generally happy. But at school, it was quite strange. I was never good at school, right? And I was mediocre at best, I would say. Tried my damnedest, but so I don't know. They don't have the 11 plus here, but I mean, I always feel like that was my point where my confidence just plummeted, right? So in the North Ireland and in England, they still have it, the 11 plus, which is a selection process that you have to go through in primary 7 to decide what school you go to. So basically, right, the smart kids, you go there. Dumb kids, you go there. And that was all it was. I distinctly remember. So if you imagine here, it's like waiting in your Nat 5s or something coming in and stuff. So you're 11 years old waiting in this postman coming, right? The pressure is immense, right? You just phenomenal for what 11 and I categorically disagree with the whole process, and I've even done research pieces on it. So I remember I was the first one in my class to get a D, right? It was ABCD, and I got a D. Like, and you're like, oh my god! Everybody was going up the town that day. They spend like a few quid and stuff, and all my mates were like A's and that. I was like, oh man, I feel so stupid, And for an 11-year-old, totally berated myself, and that was the beginning where I kind of started. I lost my confidence in my ability. And in time, it wasn't until after secondary school that I realised actually that exams aren't for me. Give me a piece of coursework, I'll smash it. But it was whenever I kind of went, and I was supposed to go to one high school that was near me, and I grew up a lot with my granny and granda in the Brandywell, and so there was a school near there called St Joseph's up in Craigan. So I wanted to go there, right, because it was handy for. So there was a whole, like, my man and dad had to go to like the board of governors and put an appeal in and all this. I mean, I have to fair play to them. I mean, it was a nightmare. But eventually I got passed because the headmaster and all passed it and stuff. But so I went to St Joe's, and it was like boys from everywhere, all boys school, right? So you can imagine all boys school, from a lot of the kind of areas in Derry that were areas of deprivation, and everybody's used to fighting their own corner, and so there's quite a few scraps, you know what I mean, in that school. And but again, kind of growing up, I was quite good at connecting with people, right? I was quite good at kind of almost connecting with people that you wouldn't ordinarily connect with. So if I was from the Brandywell and somebody was from the Bog or from Craigan, I was usually like, you stick to your own, But I was quite good at kind of merging it a wee bit and going, what's a crack, as the classes kind of started crossing over. But like exams and stuff, I was crap. But what I started to realise with people would be like, what do you think of this here? And they start talking about like something that's happening at home, and I'm like, why is he telling me that? And then immediately you start falling into this. That's crap. Are you all right? And how's that for you? And you start to realise, right, I'm just being a good human. On reflection, right, I was kind of thinking, it's just basic core skills of just being a good human and being kind. Nothing else. There was no other agenda to it. I mean, part of me thought, go on, just leave me alone. Just stop coming. I genuinely, at one point, I thought there was a queue around the corner. And I was like, Jesus, somebody's taking a hand on it. Jeremy Beadle's going to pop out or something. If you know who Jeremy Beadle is, oh no, show me. So there's another Google for you after. You've Been Framed. Right? So that kind of, he was the original. But I was quite good at connecting with people and stuff, and I think listening, I got that down quite quite early, probably because I didn't want to talk, you know. So if I didn't want to share, so I'll tell you something funny. So my mates, do you know how you're at school and you slag each other's ma, right?
Yeah.
You'd say a name and such and such. So my ma's name's Patricia, right?
Yeah.
All my mates at school thought her name was Mary
Okay.
till I was in fifth year, right? I kept it alive for 5 years, and every time they would go, "Oh, Mary," I would go, "Ah, see you boys," and you know, because I just didn't, I just see that locked it down stuff. I was able to kind of close things off and keep myself safe, and which is what I thought. You know, just don't tell anybody anything. If nobody knows anything, they can't hurt you, right? But I was happy to take it on, right, and support people. But it was quite interesting. Like, see, growing up then, it was like you used to get notes coming in into the class, and you would think, "Oh, happy days! There's a bomb scare," right? And you'd be going, "Great, I'm getting home a half day." Now, when I started talking to my wife and her family and stuff over here, they're like, "What kind of? That's not normal."
Yeah.
They hope for a bomb scare in your school and stuff, but then it was just the norm. So when you don't know any different, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you do often hear bombs and things going off or riots, do you know what I mean? Being in the middle of a riot and stuff, and it just so happens that, you know, there's a bit of crack and it's, you know, it turns out to be fun because it's livens the day up.
Yeah.
And you just think, well, what? When you look at when I look at my childhood and I reflect on it, a lot of I think, how am I not traumatized? You know, and there must be elements of PTSD there, mild elements of what you witnessed, and how many people growing up through the Troubles, we start to see that now when you look at the statistics, have been affected by PTSD of what they've seen, heard. I remember one night, I must have been younger, must have been about 7 or something, and I must have seen something that was on the news all the time, right? Bombings and this and that. And my mum and dad was going out for a meal. And I distinctly remember I was staying at my auntie's house, and so she had 2 kids about my age. And I woke up like screaming the house down. And I was like, "Oh, get them home, they're going to get blew." I was adamant they were going to get blew up, right? So I think that then there was no mobiles. So they had to ring the restaurant and get them to come home to my auntie's house to prove to me that they were safe and they were all right. And they eventually took me home because I just couldn't settle, you know. And that's induced trauma that you're seeing through footage on the news and things you see and hear. But then it becomes quite numbing. You just you get to the point where you're like, it's another, it just happens, you know. But I think once I left school, and believe it or not, I bluffed my way into 6th year. Bluffed it. Failed it miserably, but bluffed it. And I remember in 6th year that I'd picked what I thought would be the topics that would be easy. So history, politics, and sociology. Right. So some clown told me that, you know, they all intertwine. So do these, and I was like, Jesus. Once I started, but I remember the sociology teacher, and I always remember this guy because he was my driving force to any success or anything I pushed towards. It was like he says to me, "Oh, Harrigan, you'll never amount to anything. You know, you're stupid. You know, all this kind of stuff." I thought, screw you. You know, so with probably a bit of spite, failed my A levels, went to college, met an amazing guy here, Jerry McDevitt, supported me through kind of studying childcare and care in general. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do a sociology degree for no other reason than they just stick it to the teacher. You know, and the reason I wanted to do it was because he was an English teacher and he didn't have a sociology degree. So my purpose in life to go to university was pure spite. To just go, right. So I ended up doing social policy and sociology. And I did meet that guy in a bar one night. And I says to him, "Oh, how you getting on?" "Oh, I'm fine, still in the school." And I says, "Oh, really? I got a degree in sociology. Have you got one?" And I thought, see, after it, I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, you know, what age are you now? So I think that was the turning point. I thought, nah, you know, that's don't be an idiot.
Yeah.
You know.
I think a lot of those kind of elements of what we Because I don't think anyone at school would have ever expected me to go on and start running a business or a successful business or do anything of this nature. Besides gaming, people knew that I gamed pretty much my whole life, and I think that I've only ever bumped into a couple of teachers, but one of the teachers that I did bump into, when he asked me what I was doing at that time, I was at university and I had my own first business. And the first words that came out of my mouth was, I was at university, and he laughed. And he was like, "You're at university? Studying what?" I was like, "Oh, accountancy." "You're studying accountancy?" And I was like, this is a bit funky. This is a bit of a funky engagement. This I went on, had my Nando's. Jamie that I was there with was laughing and stuff like that. Just kind of like, what kind of weird engagement actually is that? But I'd probably say an element of my success probably came from spite too. Where I was just like, oh, fuck yous. I'm just going to go and do what I want anyways.
How did that feel for you? Like that engagement? How was that for you? Because you're saying funky.
Yeah. Funky was the first word that came to my mind. To begin with, it was kind of like we feeling in my stomach of like being a little bit pissed off, or in hindsight now reflecting on it, it was probably me somewhat reflecting on how I was at school as well, where it was kind of like I didn't do anything at school really all my life, kind of somewhat you. I done all the things I thought was going to be easy. And in 6th year I done refereeing, sports leadership and PE. So I would come in my PE kit the whole day and just play football and volleyball and badminton and just so to most people it was understandable to a certain extent why they would think that, why they would say that to me at the time of then going on and doing it. I have no idea. But at that time probably like a wee bit of anger, a wee bit of resentment. And then at the same time, it was like, well, fuck you. I'm going to go on and just do everything that you never thought I could ever do. So definitely an element of spite. But as well, as just like you said, as you grown, as I grown, I just come to realise that it didn't matter. And he didn't matter. And most of the experience in school didn't necessarily matter either in terms of the broader scope of what I'm doing now. And also, you never really know why someone says what they do either. They could be having a shit day or a terrible childhood, or who knows. There's a lot that could come down to.
Well, there's a part that doesn't make it excusable either, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
To instill that level of failure into somebody so young can be seriously damaging, you know, and luckily you were able to come out of that and go, actually, fuck you, or whatever it is. But there's also a point where you think, right, well, what if you weren't that kind of person? What if you didn't have that resilience or that support behind you? That, you know, how damaging would that be? Yeah. Or where would you end up?
Yeah, you know? Definitely.
And how often does that happen?
I know. It's definitely something to reflect on. There was one area as well that you brought up, and it was an element of when you were basically going along the lines of why people came to you for advice. And obviously you said about just being a good human being, but the one thing was the fact that you just listened, which I think a lot of people definitely don't just listen. And it's I think the turning point for me was when I heard the most simple saying about the fact that we've got 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. And that's what I just went on to just live by, where it was like I started to meet people that I admired, and the people that I admire spoke less and asked the important questions. And essentially when I met those people that I admired, no matter how hard I tried to be the one to get them talking, I was always the one talking. And it kind of became something that I admired and I wanted to pivot into, and probably why I ended up doing a podcast in the first place, because all you're doing as a podcast host is asking the right questions. And upon reflecting on that level of admiration, the people that were just listening, I realised the power of it as well. To the point where I went out with an old schoolmate I hadn't spoken to for years. He was having some problems with his girlfriend or whatever. And before I knew it, it was like I'd asked like 3 questions, and he pure looked at me and it was like one after another. He'd give me his answer. He was like, pure deep breath in. Fucking hell, this feels like a therapy session. And I was like, I didn't even process, because it becomes in business, it becomes so normal to just sit and ask questions, or at least people that are successful in business just sit and ask questions, and that is what they use to gather as much information, or whether they want to work with somebody or whatever it may be. But that element of listening, why was it that listening was your priority instead of speaking?
I think you made the point at the beginning. There was always this. So when I was younger, I wanted to be a priest, right?
Okay.
So I always felt there was a vocational element to what I wanted to do. So there wanted the helping side, that there was always that kind of helping, whatever that would have been or what it looked like. So whenever it came to kind of listening to people, I always say to people there's a difference between listening and hearing.
Okay.
Because when you listen to someone, you're thinking about a response. And when your bit's coming in, when you're hearing somebody, nothing else matters except what they're saying. And I've been able to kind of evolve that from when I was 14, thankfully, or I wouldn't be in a job, that I've moved on from listening to actually hearing people.
Yep.
And I think when you hear them, I was maybe doing an element of hearing then as well, because I didn't ask a lot of questions. It was like, how are you? Well, why is that? What can we do differently? All these questions that I tend to ask sometimes in therapy now, that, looking at some solutions and supportive mechanisms. And the hearing element was always there, I think.
Yeah.
In a 14-year-old boy, it's not always there. It's like bravado, and how do I be the biggest in the room, the strongest, especially in an all boys school. There's always a kind of fight for like an alpha.
Yeah.
And you always knew the biggest guy in the school. You always knew. I could tell you off the top of my head. But it was one of those, how do I be out or be different? While also being something that somebody needs to a point, if you know what I mean.
I think from what I gathered from what you're saying is that a lot of people, especially in school, it's a more selfish outlook on how do I look the best, whereas your outlook was very selfless. It was very much, how can I, not necessarily how can I help it just, I'm getting the impression from what you're saying, which you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you didn't necessarily care how you were portrayed as like an alpha male, for example, or as like a whatever the stereotype would be around it, and that you just cared more about being a good human being.
Aye, don't get me wrong. Every boy at school wants to, they care about how they look, how they come across, because it's a social system, So, but I think there was an underlying element to me that, and I think that was instilled from like my parents and my grandparents, that sometimes it doesn't matter, that what you are, and where you sit on that ladder. It's about who you are kind of internally. So if you can be kind, be genuine, empathize with people, the simple things that we all have the capacity to do. And I think that's what I try to support other people to understand, is that it's not about being a therapist as much as it is just being a kind person. And when the therapist part comes with training, and it comes with modalities and all the other science behind it. But there's a point of if you came to therapy for me and I had no other skills or no 14 years under my belt, if I was sitting and just being kind and genuine, and you thought, this guy's actually hearing me, you're more likely to open up. So it's not about somebody going, well, this is what Freud would say, right? It's nothing to do with that. It's very much about, because clients don't know, they partly they don't care. They just want to be supported on the journey that they're on. So I've digressed slightly, but I think that's where the installment in me has always stayed the same. Just be genuine.
Love that, man. Absolutely love that. And you kind of touched on a couple of the areas already in terms of, I actually think that I already know your answer before you actually tell me the answer to this question.
Right, okay.
But kind of what we spoke about at the beginning, the kind of points that we wanted to go through, the phases. I feel like every time I'm speaking to someone, or I do get to a personal level with someone, they'll speak about an area of their life that they're struggling in, or an area that they know someone else that's struggling, and they potentially don't know what to do. So what would be the best thing that you would advise someone to do that knows another individual is struggling from a mental health aspect?
I think the first thing is it's always hard when it's close to home,
Mm.
right? So even if you're a therapist, if you're a psychotherapist, psychologist, when it's close to home, all bets are off,
Mm.
right? You're not the therapist then, you're just the person. So and you do get anxious. You think, oh, I can support so many other people. Why can I not support the people close to me? And it's because it's too close. You know, you don't see that. You become a rescuer. You want to just take it and fix it, right? That's all right. Just give me that. I'll do it. But tell me what I can do. Tell me what I can do. And a lot of the time people don't need that, right? A lot of the time it's they just need to be supported. And that's where a lot of people, whenever they come to therapy, I could never tell my partner. You know, why could you not tell? They'll never understand.
Mm.
Have you tried to tell them? I just know that, you know, that they're so thingy about mental health. You know, that oh, just get on with it, and oh, everybody's popping pills now and all this kind of stuff. But if you're able to kind of sit and support the person who is your partner, your friend, your colleague, it's just about being a good human, right? It's not about going thinking, oh, I need to know, you know, attachment theory and where they originated from childhood. And no, you don't. You just deal with the person now and just, are they sad? Are they upset? Are they angry? Why are they angry? Right? You talked about this a few times. You know why? You know, start with the why.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've probably both read that book, the Simon Sinek book. So you look at it in relation to business, but look at it in relation to people.
Mm.
Why? Why are you in it? You know, why are you in that relationship?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in it because I care about them. Why do you care about them? Because, you know, that they're kind to me. We care about each other. Blah blah blah. Well, build on that. You know, use that and just be kind to each other.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty whenever you get people who fear telling someone what their issue is, especially if it's historical as well.
Yeah.
You know, so if it's stuff like where there's abuse involved or things like that, where it's quite physical or emotional or sexual, then they'll kind of veer away and go, they'll never understand. It'll
Mm.
break up the relationship, and it's the most difficult conversation that they'll have.
Yeah.
But it'll be the most rewarding because ultimately they need to know if that person is on that journey with them.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. And then the contrast of that question, or the opposite end of that question, what is the worst thing that someone could do when they know someone is alongside them is struggling?
The worst thing they can do is do nothing, right? And I know you would love me to elaborate on that, but the worst thing they can do is do nothing. So if you're sitting and somebody says, "Do you know what? I really need to talk to you. Um, I'm I feel like I'm not right. Something's wrong. I'm just not feeling myself." Look, you'll be fine. Just, you know, do you want a drink? Right? All these immediate responses that you would get from people who have a fear, and that's what it is. They're actually afraid because they're afraid to ask, what is it? What can I do? Because the fear is, what if I can't handle this?
Mm.
Right? There's that instilled fear of, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to deal with this. They're going to tell me something that I don't want to know. So let's just paper over the cracks, right? And there's always that, especially with stuff like suicide. So people struggle to tell others that, you know, I'm thinking about suicide. Suicide's like a dirty word. So it's still, you know, it's like that. Still has that taboo and that stigma of, oh, if I talk about suicide, they'll do it. No, not. Do you know, if someone's thinking about suicide and they're contemplating doing it, then they're going to do it. Whether, you know, you do not have that power. You are not all powerful to be able to make someone take that final step. What you can do is say, what can I do? You know, what can we do to help you? And finding the right support mechanisms for them. So what what should they not do is just not do anything.
Yeah.
You know, just ask. And you will be afraid, you know, and I suppose that's partly why we developed a lot of the training stuff that we did over lockdown, especially because some of the training that is now up and running is stuff like assist, so applied suicide intervention training. That's all kind of coming to the fore again, and we're going to be delivering that. But during lockdown, we've seen a huge gap because a lot of the training was all, well, if you can't do it face to face, then we can't deliver it.
Mm.
So myself and a colleague says, well, look, you know, we need to support people, especially now more than anything, because they need to be able to talk about the things that is going to be coming up during lockdown.
Yeah.
So we wrote an 8 modular course and got it SQA'd and SCQF leveled, and So it's a mental well-being and health course, but we talk about the topics that are really difficult to talk about, that people have kind of veered away from, like self-harm, suicide, child sexual exploitation. You know, all these things were, oh, that doesn't happen in my street. You know, oh, no, I don't know anybody that does that. Really? How much do you drink at the weekend?
Yeah.
Oh, I would just have the 12 cans. And that's not self-harm. Are you joking? So it's about understanding, right, well, what is self-harm? You know, these types of things, and realising that we all do it in one way, shape or form. You know?
So you had me captivated there, mate. I was so engrossed in what you were saying. And I think it's something that we spoke about many times. Especially like within like YN, having the aspect of a module or your multiple modules or a course that would help people understand what to actually do in situations where they would. The word that kept screaming out to me from what you were saying was that, and when you were saying what people were fearful of, especially around the talk of suicide, I think a lot of people feel helpless. And I think in areas where people feel helpless, in usual areas that they would, maybe in areas of their life they would have a lot of control, whereas this is one thing that you cannot control. And it's what you just said there. You know, you can, no matter what you do, it's not going to be, that's not going to be the defining factor of whether they decide to do it or not. Which I think, when I actually went through I think I spoke to you before, I don't know if I ever brought it up, I don't even know if I've spoken about it in the podcast actually. I had a phobia called emetophobia, the fear of being sick. And I realised through doing a course that actually comes from constantly want to be in control of something that you can't control, which sickness is that one that you can't control whether or not you're going to be sick. So I had coping mechanisms and things that I would do that I believed was controlling whether or not I was going to be sick, when in reality I could eat anything that was going to set me sideways, and I would believe that somehow I could control that. I don't know why I digress so much into that. I felt like it was important because when people feel helpless, they look to seek. They're wanting to seek some form of control, but in these sort of situations, there is not really much control.
And you know, it comes down to other stuff like anxiety. It's a control issue. You know, feeling out of control and anxious because you can't control scenarios that may or may not happen. But when we talk about suicide, we even use different words for it because we're afraid to say the word. Now, I've never heard this, but my colleague talks about Harry Carey. Never heard of that? So it's something, apparently it's through Glasgow way. Are you going to commit Harry Carey? Are you going to go out the side door? You know, are you going to take the jump? Are you thinking about doing something stupid? We all use you use so many different ways of saying it, but it's open to interpretation. Now, I don't know what Harry Carey is from Scooby Doo, right? So you could say that to me, but I don't know what is that. Whereas if you say to me, "Are you thinking about taking your life? Or are you thinking about completing suicide?" I absolutely know what you're talking about, because there's no other agenda there. There's no other kind of way you can interpret that. So we need to get people more confident about using these words, so that when and if the time comes, that the other person can say, actually, I am. Not, you know, you thinking about doing something stupid. What, like buying these dodgy trousers or the next? No. It's using the word. The more we use the word, the more we become comfortable with it, and then the more the people who are feeling that way will feel more comfortable to say, actually, I am. Because if you're comfortable to ask me using that word, I'm comfortable to respond with a genuine answer. You say, are you thinking about doing something stupid? Automatically, what's the other person going to think? You know, it's a judgment. Oh, they're judging me because they think it's stupid. I'm not going to say anything. No, I'm fine. No, that's not what you mean. No, you know, and then it creates that barrier. But it's the person who's asking the question subconsciously knows they're doing that. Because they're going, well, if I ask them, are they doing something stupid? They'll feel stupid, and then they'll stop it. No, you know, just make them not tell you. You know.
How is it that you truly make someone feel comfortable?
I think it's again based about trust. So it depends what the person's presenting with as well. There's so many variables, and it's just Like for younger age ranges, you're talking kind of under 16s and like 11 upwards. It's very much about getting on their level. You know, talking to them like they've never been spoken to before, because children are always spoken for.
Yeah.
Right? They never have a voice. Like their parent, their guardian, whoever takes them to the doctors, they speak for them. Take them to the dentist, they speak for them. School, their judo club, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then what they find really strange is they come into us and we'll go, so what would you like to talk about? And they go, whoa, wait a minute, this is that. There's a catch here, big time. And parents struggle with that, you know, and we need to make parents comfortable as well in our service, that because whenever they come in, they'll say, "Oh, well, I'll just come in, will I?" You go, "No, that's not how it works. You know, this is a young person's led service. That's why it is unique, because they can have the voice. Because you might be the issue. Don't say that, but you know, it might be that, look, I'm struggling to tell my mum that, you know, I'm gay, or I'm getting bullied at school, or so they might say, well, look, if my mum's there, can I talk about it? You know, so I think building that trust with young people is about speaking to them on the level and saying, look, you know, you can be honest. With young people, I'll always give them something about me. So I'll always be vulnerable first.
Yeah.
So, because again, why would I ask somebody to be vulnerable in front of me if I can't be vulnerable in front of them? So we talk about that in relation to self-disclosure in therapy. When is it appropriate? When can you do it? How much self-disclosure do you give as well? You know, you don't be like, you know, I love a whiskey and this is, you know, it's very much like, well, look, I had anger issues when I was younger. You know, I struggled with controlling my emotions and I didn't know how to do it. And it sounds like that's maybe a wee bit about what's happening for you. You know, do you want to tell me a wee bit about that? And because this is how I managed to deal with it, and hopefully I can support you with that.
Yep.
For adults, it's very different. It's you know, again, it's trust. But it's creating a boundary for them, because albeit you might think that adults, you know, they're coming on, they don't want to be told, or, you know, that this is my space and look, here's the boundaries, here's the confines, here's the security within the confidentiality. And then they feel safe. It's like being in a wee bubble. And they're like, right now, I feel like I can trust you. And you'll always get, more often than not, the first session, I'll always say, look, just tell me a bit about you. Hobbies, interests. Who are you? Don't define yourself by the issue you're here to support, because that's a secondary thing. Who are you as a person?
Yep.
You know, do you have a hobby? What's your favorite band? Favorite movie? And then I'll reciprocate, and then they'll go, right, well, I feel like I know this guy a wee bit. You know.
And it just comes back to what you were speaking about at the beginning about building rapport. The more rapport you build with someone, more comfortable they'll feel. You'll then open up to obviously ways to actually get to the solution that is required for the problem. There was something that you spoke about in our second discussion around your mum and the kind of experiences you had growing up, and this one specific man that you've seen as a superhero of some sort.
Pretty much, aye.
What did that look like when you were growing up?
So when I was probably about 10, maybe 10, 11, my mum started taking what was known then as panic attacks, as anxiety attacks, and social anxiety and stuff like that. But it came out of nowhere. So I remember distinctly, she was away into a shopping centre. I was sitting in a taxi with my auntie. I thought, right, well, she ran in to get something, and then I seen her getting helped out by somebody, like a shop assistant kind of thing, like over her shoulder, and she was shaking, like really, really shaking. And I thought, what's happening? And immediately I thought there's been a bomb, and did I just not hear it? And that's the one image I can always remember, is that, right. So I remember seeing that, and then whatever happened after that, I don't know, because I think I just went into shutdown mode. And she struggled to go out the door for a long time, you know, and had social anxiety, and, you know, had to take medication for anxiety, depression, and different things for many years. And then, but there was this one guy who, it's the guy I think you're talking about, who Brendan Armstrong, he called him, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was like a key worker probably, and his job was to kind of come in, do some, probably at the time it was CBT stuff, like worksheets and diary journaling and all this kind of stuff. But eventually the approach was, right, well, we need to get you out, right? So, and I watched this intently. I see this. I mean, he looked like, I'm not going to insult him because this isn't an insult, but he looked like this giant leprechaun, right? He had red hair, red moustache, really big guy, probably considering I was an 11-year-old or 12-year-old. And this guy was huge, and I thought, oh, that's like Man Mountain coming in. But he was so gentle, like he's softly spoken, and just think that your voice and your mannerisms don't match your persona, like your height and your so he came in and he would do these worksheets and stuff, and then it felt like it just happened one day out of nowhere. And he was like, right, we're going out. And I was like, who's he talking to? Who's talking to me? So, and he was one of these, like, you don't say no. Like, he obviously knew they were at that point where it was breaking point and it was time to tip.
Yeah.
So, and he was like, look, Patricia, this is what we're doing. Let's go. We'll walk to the end and we'll go to the lamppost right outside the door and that. I was like mesmerised, I was like, this ain't going to happen. This.
Yeah.
And he done it, and I remember getting this rush of emotion, and it was so confusing. So it was like happiness, anxiety, fear. What if something happens to her again outside? Like, she was only outside the door, but immediately I get this fear of, what if this happens again? What if he takes her back to where she was whenever it first happened? And she came back, and you could see, like, I mean, she was drained, physically drained with the exhaustion of trying to get her head around doing this. And then that kind of built up over time, and then it was like, we'll take a wee bit further, and go out in the car. And then I think one of the things was he used to, she wanted to be able to go to chapel, so she was like, that was kind of part of the goals and stuff. But I mean, he got her out the door, and eventually, she started being able to go out and without him. And I was like, this is just phenomenal. Like, what a gift this man has. And I remember thinking, if I could give anybody or any family or any child back something like that, that would be something that I would. And I think that was the tipping point as well for me, is maybe why my listening kind of became more attentive when I was 14 or 15, that I watched this guy, although he maybe never knew I was listening to how he was responding. I was maybe mimicking.
Yeah.
Right. So I was maybe mimicking Brendan and how he was supporting, because I thought, well, that works. That absolutely works.
Yeah. We often model the people that we admire most, and it sounds to me like you admired having what he'd done for your mum.
Aye, absolutely.
Which is, it's incredible, mate. And it's, when you were telling me that story for the first time, I was like, it's outstanding, because it comes from the way in which we've utilised this podcast. You've went through a lot of your journey and how you've ended up to where you are today. And that was one of the early signs of you being exposed to what mental health looks like, and essentially a first-hand solution. You literally witness your mum go from the pits to where she was able to go out on her own, whether she was able to go to chapel, which is outstanding. So it's no surprise to me, mate, when you're breaking it down, that at the age of 14 people are coming to you for advice.
Aye, I know. It's whenever you look at it in a timeline of events, you can just see the pattern. And I think because he was male as well.
Yeah.
There was that, men didn't do that job. What are you doing that job for? So it was that, is this acceptable?
Yeah.
Is it acceptable to do this as a job? To go into the caring profession? And at that point then, after I seen that, I was like, I don't care, I'm doing it. One way or another,
Nah, makes complete sense, mate. And one of the last things that we were going to speak about is the fact that you've got this very unusual paradox when it comes to running a company. And kind of digressing into how that actually feels, because you've got a company that you hope one day will cease to exist.
Yeah.
So when things are quote unquote drying up, you're getting less clients in the door. do you develop a level of optimism?
I'm still waiting for that point to come. I think it'll take us back to the very beginning of hope.
Yeah.
You know, I hope that we're able to close the doors. I hope that we never had to open them. You know, that was the frustrating part for me. That, I mean, we've created another strand to the, as a social enterprise. We have a training arm that will hopefully minimize and eradicate some of the people who need to come, because they'll be more resilient and confident because they know some of the stuff now in support mechanisms
Yep.
that they can do, get involved in without coming for therapy. You know, so they'll hopefully do the training as instead of being reactive, being proactive, so that if down the line something happens, they think, oh, do you know, I'm going to look over my notes for that course because that was really helpful about depression and what I could use for. So my aim is always for S.M.I.L.E counselling to close. And it is a paradox because it's one of those things that, I mean, if you start a social enterprise, you know, people always kind of go, oh, well, it's a charity, you know, and there's always that confusion of, well, it's not, it's a social enterprise, it's a SKIO, it's a business, you know, essentially. But the purpose behind the business was because there was a demand. You know, there was a huge gap. Now, the numbers that I've heard most recently, you know, we certainly won't be closing the doors in the next 5 years. But I would like to be able to shut them before I retire, and just keep the training arm and allow us to develop the community with their own resilience and skills to be able to support each other. Because I think that's where a lot of it lies. You know, you have that element of there's only so many therapists, there's only so many psychologists in the hospital, and for albeit a lot of statutory services get a bad rep, that they're massively overstretched, and so are we. So the hope is if we can't support so many to come through services, can we support the community to support each other? Not clinically, but just to be more aware, more knowledgeable, and more confident to ask the questions instead of just doing nothing.
Do you feel like that is the long-term solution?
Community support? I think there'll always be a need for therapeutic input and you know, clinical support, especially if it's somebody with, you know, severe clinical needs, and you know, medication is always needed, you know, for some clients. It's, you know, if they're going through various severe mental illness, then it needs to be supported. But talking therapies is always, you know, I mean, I'm going to be biased, but you know, it's something that's always going to be useful, because even to work in tandem with a clinical arm of, you know, medication, and you know, we can support it without it being an us and them. You know, because for a while there it was like, oh well, if you're working with them, you can't work with us. You know, from kind of statutory, and it was like, well, why can we not all work together? You know, join up, and then that way, if they're doing that part with you, we can do this part, and then hopefully it's a more holistic approach. So there will always be a need for clinical input. I don't think that's going to dilute, but I think we're in a unique position to build a stronger resilience, but we need to focus on young people. We need to focus on kids now.
And it makes sense in terms of when you said that there will always be somewhat of a need, especially reflecting on my own personal journey. Therapy was never something that I ever thought I would ever do for whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe it was just an element of my programming. But when I started to get in business, I started to feel overwhelmed. Started to feel a massive weight on my shoulders. I started to feel like, holy shit, I've actually got clients that are somewhat relying on me to you know, deliver results. And at that time, YN was very wishy-washy. People were gambling on me because they believed in me. They didn't. The concept wasn't proven. The way that we had evolved it wasn't proven either. And I was just fortunate enough to have people that believed in me and what I was obviously providing them with. And now we're actually getting tangible results, which is outstanding. It's what it's going to allow us to take it to a whole new level. But I remember at that time, I'd done an exercise with Isabel Lemon, who's one of our clients, and she just suggested just having, just like you said, just a discussion around it. And when we'd done the discussion, she asked me to close my eyes and this was just one element of it, but this was the turning point for me when I realised the weight that I was putting on my own shoulders of the clients. And it was basically to the weight. I don't think it was necessarily the weight of importance of myself, but we'll just use that as an example. One hand had me in it, and the other hand had my clients.
Yeah.
And closed my eyes, and I'd obviously visualised what it looked like. And my right arm started shaking and falling down. And by the time I'd opened my eyes, my right arm was down way further. And that was the kind of point where I was like, fuck. And that then digressed into, like you said, it like goes deeper. Why do you feel like you're responsible for your clients, results actually are? Because you're not. So why do you feel like that you are? And then it started to get into things like why I constantly over deliver, why I constantly go above and beyond. Where does that actually come from? What does that actually look like? Like, why do you feel like you need to do all this stuff that you've absolutely not promised? You're absolutely not getting paid for either. Like in the grand scheme of it, and a lot of it was around availability as well. Man, I would annihilate my own boundaries that I'd set just to make sure that someone was okay, even though they were okay. But I was, trying to like understand that, and that's come from someone that never believed that they would ever be in a position to where they would quote unquote need therapy, because I don't feel like I've went through anything that, like you said before, everyone's always worse off, for example. And it was something that helped me fucking hugely, man. Once I actually seen that and I visualised that experience, me and S.M.I.L.E done a good few sessions, man, where we sat and really went deep onto the problem that was coming to the surface, and how to eliminate that. And I think if I never sorted that, I probably would have burnt out on quite a mad level, to be fair, because I was constant, man. Could not breathe for fucking wanting to constantly help people in whatever way which I could. And I felt like that was also a direct result in how much I or the business would make. I felt like they ran in tangent with each other. They ran hand in hand when they don't. They don't. It took a while for me to realise that, man. And that's, I think, a lot of people within business. You ever watch Suits?
Have I ever
watched Suits?
Nah.
On Netflix?
Nah.
I think that was the first show that I watched where all the top people within this lawyer firm all had their own therapists.
All right, okay.
So like Lewis, who was one of the biggest characters, he started off at the very early stages where he couldn't, it's been years since I've watched it, but he couldn't hold his temper. He was very jealous of the other main character. So it's all a show, so it's not actually real. But the concept of it though was that, the people that were at the top almost had to offload so that they could be the best lawyer that they could possibly be when they were actually in the room. Which kind of got me into like thinking about the actual help that therapy could offer for individuals that are within business that are in high stress environments or zones, and how that could actually help them.
Absolutely. And you're making good points here, because the one thing that we always think about therapy as it has a negative connotation, right? It's, oh, I'm in therapy. People's tone changed, oh, I'm in therapy. Like it's something bad. So it becomes that, well, if you're talking about therapy and where you're in it, you must be mental, right? And then it's like, again, even the word mental health, using the word mental has a negative connotation to it, because we used it so purposefully to hurt people by using that kind of terminology. Why can it not just be health across the board? So we're talking about, will therapy need to exist, or should it? If you broke your leg, for example, would you rather the NHS didn't exist and you couldn't get it plastered, or would you still need to get it plastered? Right? Sometimes you can't control that. Just the same way you can't control your mental health. Sometimes things happen, and so many things happen in our lives. Should it be bereavement or loss, and not just loss of someone, but loss of a job, loss of a partner, loss of a dog? It doesn't matter. Whatever you have an attachment to, that is going to impact you. So what we need to get better at, I think, is seeing therapy as something that could be productive and an early intervention model. So rather than being reactive, be proactive. You don't
Yeah.
have to go to therapy when things are bad. Go to therapy when things are good.
Yeah.
You know, because when you go then you'll start to see the benefit when things do get difficult, because you'll have a bigger toolbox
Yeah.
of skills and things and that you can use to go, oh, you know, I was talking about this a few weeks ago. Now this has happened to me.
Yeah.
You know, I can foresee that, and here's what I'm going to do. Business is a great example. You
Yeah.
know, most people in senior roles, it's a lonely job.
Yeah.
You know, if you own your own business, you run your own business, or you're the head of an organization, the one thing everybody will tell you is it's lonely.
Yeah.
And if it's the private sector, trust is an issue.
Yeah.
You know, because are my competitors going to see me as a weakness, or are they going to see that I'm weak if I'm doing this and needing therapy? And if we're proactive and we endorse it as a mechanism that we need as a way to kind of be more whole,
Yeah.
then it can only be positive going forward, you know.
No, I couldn't agree more. You kind of touched on that, one of the key points as well, around people seeing it as a weakness within business, and also seeing it as an area that it's that way that they want to be perceived. The first thing that we spoke about in terms of like a macho man not wanting to be perceived in a way of weak. I think in business, in the position that a lot of us take, it's also something that, because I instantly see things pop up in my mind, like speaking about it in terms of how people could potentially see it,
Yeah.
just because I've heard people say it before.
Why does that matter though?
I know. Why does it matter? But it's also, when it does crop up, it's more like I start to see the challenges that people are facing of why they're not getting help. And because I think the last episode we done, which was with Connor Malone, we spoke so much on that podcast about self-awareness and
Yeah.
being self-aware enough to know what is important to you and how it could potentially help you. And even the first chat that me and Paul had, we sat for 3 hours and 45 minutes, just literally sitting here. I came in for the podcast, like, to speak to Paul about how we could potentially work together, what we could do. For nearly 4 hours, man, we just spoke about life, what he was doing, what I was doing, and that level of discussion, that level of like, it was just something that was so powerful about that. But I feel like where I was linking it to that was the self-awareness levels of understanding what is actually important to you. And just like you said there, why would it matter what other people would think of you or perceive you? Because I would never look at someone as being weak for going to therapy.
Yeah.
So if I was working with someone that perceived it in that way, is that an indication that I should be working with them in the first place? Are they my kind of person? Are they my kind of client? Or is it just a simple just contrast in belief, or programming around it?
Aye. They may not be. I mean, remember, you're on your journey. They may not be as far along.
Yeah.
So they might be at the early stages where they have not had the input that you've had.
Yeah.
You know, the mentor that you've had, all the things that are introduced to you
Yep.
that allowed you to feel confident enough to say those things. These people may not have had yet.
Yeah.
So are you then in a position not to say, are they the right person for me, but am I the right person for them to support them on this journey to find a better level of self-awareness?
Absolutely. It's something that if we, especially for myself, it was a piece of advice I got from, funnily enough, you say mentor Paula, and it was just about offering that hand out and just seeing what people do with it. You know, offering an area that you believe that you can help. If you don't believe that they are, it's going to sound very, I don't even know the word for it, but say they're not at your level yet,
Yeah.
or they've not, like you said, further along in their journey, offering them that hand to see what they do. Because Paula done that for me when I was 19. She offered me the hand of 1-1-1 a month for free because I was a student and I couldn't afford it at the time. And that was the hand that essentially I grabbed onto with both hands and then catapulted myself to where I am now. In the way that she basically positioned that for me made me shift my belief system around it. In some of the language I was using around it there, even saying, for example, are they right for me? Am I actually right for them though? And just offering that handout could just change someone's life completely.
Aye. It's perspective as well, isn't it? Because it's where you were at 19, and you're saying, right, well, I met Paula and she introduced me to the support that she provided, and then she changed your viewpoint. You wouldn't have had that viewpoint if she hadn't shifted you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about just moving perspective. So it's all there to see. It's just where are you moving in the room to see what you need to see.
Yeah.
And that's what's amazing about mentors and therapists as well. They'll see the things that you might not see yet just because you're not in a position in the room to see it.
Yeah.
They'll allow you to move seat. They say, well, now can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what she done for me. Moved me seat and was
Moved
like,
you
look what I done for you.
Yeah.
Not necessarily look what I done for you, but look at our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And where you're at now, because that could have been a crucial turning point. It definitely was, man. We kind of digressed off the topic of S.M.I.L.E season to exist, right? And I've only got one final question, mate, which is, what are you actually going to do if S.M.I.L ceases to exist?
What will I do? So this has been a strange question for me. So I got asked this not so long ago as a kind of succession planning and all that kind of stuff, as you should do. But it was very much put to me as, right, what's your exit strategy? I thought, whoa, I'm not going anywhere. Like I've got so many ideas. My vision for S.M.I.L is, the next 10 years, we're going to be making waves. We're going to be moving across counties and, I have my way countries. So, so what would I do if S.M.I.L did cease to exist? I think probably I would continue to deliver training and mentoring, probably from a social enterprise perspective. So I've had quite a few people contact me who are startup social enterprises or, wanting to go like, well, how did you grow the way you did in 7 years? Now, there's no right way to say that I didn't do everything right. I think you need to make mistakes to know what not to do and to develop, because if you don't and somebody hands you a role, then you'll make bigger mistakes down the line. But I think I mentoring and training. I love training. I love delivering training, and probably continue to see some clients, because that's what I love. It's my bread and butter, and that's where my passion is. So I love people.
Absolutely. And you already are mentoring anyways and doing training, but I think you'd be incredible just in that role, just as alone. That's halfway do whatever I had to do to get you as a mentor. And I think that you could help. You will continue to help a lot of people, mate. Which is, hopefully this podcast helps a lot of people as well, man, and people get some more of an insight. Like I said at the beginning, the goal was to unravel a couple of areas that people definitely that are in business do not speak about, and people that are also in positions that they just don't have anyone to lead on to understand how to actually handle situations within their life. And a lot of your story and upbringing was incredibly important in the person that you had become as well, mate, which, taking a leaf out of Stephen Bartlett's podcast, he starts every single podcast speaking about the individual's childhood and what they kind of went through. And I felt like that was important because I think a lot of people, man, I even have a mate, for example, that I went to school with, and sitting chatting with him, it was the one thing I was like, what is it that you actually want to do, mate? And he was like, I just want to help people, man. I'm like, how are we going to do that? How can I help you do that?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't even know, mate. I don't even know how to. I don't know how to. And I was like, well, what do you love doing? He's like, well, my mates come to me with all their problems. I was like, and how do you help them? Oh, I do this and I do that. And it's, how do they feel after it? Oh, they feel incredible. And it's like, just try to give him some sort of handout to basically help him get to a level of seeing the fact that he could become a therapist.
Aye.
Or do something along those lines. It's very interesting.
I think it's just instilled. There's a part of you, because I often say, like, nobody in their right mind wants to sit and listen to somebody's problems all day, right? There has to be a drive. There has to be something that has brought you here. And it will always be that I want to give back because, or, I've had this experience because, personal or other. But we all experience pain. We all experience hurt. And when we see the people around us hurting, the natural reaction is to want to take it away, to make them feel better. And if we can do that for others who, why does it have to be the people that are immediate to us? You know, and you see so much hurt in the world. And if you're in a position to be able to just be kind,
Yep.
you know, take it back to what I said at the beginning. It doesn't have to be that, you know, you've been a therapist trained in multiple modalities. It's, you know, are you a good human? Are you kind? Do you genuinely care about why you're sitting with this person? Then you're doing good.
Absolutely, man. Fucking love that. Well, obviously, thank you so much for coming on, Declan, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Very welcome. It's
Able
been
to,
great.
able to impact as many people as we possibly can and get insight into even just that one snippet at the end, which will be enough for someone to potentially take and, you know, change their whole career path, do something that they truly want to do. So yeah, massive thank you for coming on, mate. Where can people find you?
So you can find us in West Lothian. You can find me on www.smilecounselling.org.uk. Yeah, so there's I have a private practice as well and stuff. But so yeah, just Google Smile Counselling.
And connect with you on LinkedIn and stuff like that as well.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Try to stay away from other socials. But LinkedIn's where I'm at.
Well, some links below, anyways. And also, like I said, massive thank you for coming on, mate. And wherever you're listening, whether it's on Spotify, make sure you ring the bell, follow. This will be episode number 6, so we should have another at least 5 episodes that we've got planned out. So make sure you ring the bell. It's going up every fortnight, which you'll probably know by now, anyways, because we're on episode 6. But also, if you're on YouTube, subscribe, leave a like. Make sure you let us know as well the areas of the podcast that you're loving the most, the areas that you can take and actually apply to your life, whether it's within business, whatever it is that you are doing. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Paul as well.